One of the things that God has really dealt with me on is just this idea of reckless obedience. But what about the things that make us uncomfortable? What about when God asks us to do things that don't make sense? When He asks us to do things that, quite honestly, defies reason, it defies logic, it defies what culture is telling us we should do or how we should do things. Obedience is never free. And yes, I got my notes today because this was a lot. God downloaded a lot, and this whole idea of manifesting and how manifesting really is the language of Antichrist. Obedience is when we say yes to God, even when, as I mentioned, logic, reason really kind of goes out the window. Welcome to Truth Measured Podcast. I'm your girl, Tiffany, and this is episode 2. So thank you guys for tuning in again, subscribing, sharing, commenting, liking, all of the things. Thank you. I appreciate it so much. And I'm excited you're here. So let's jump into today's topic. I feel like last week, was the first episode. We kind of slid into some touchy things. I've gotten some feedback from some of you on the episode, and it's a blessing and it's encouraging to me to know that it allowed you to walk away thinking about your relationships and thinking about how you communicate. And so thank you for the encouragement. But today I want to talk about something that's going to make us dig a little deeper and think a little bit harder about how we're moving and the things that we're doing. So one of the things that God has really dealt with me on is just this idea of reckless obedience. It's easy to be like, yeah, God, I'm being obedient. I'm, checking off the different boxes that, I'm supposed to check off as a Christian. I don't go here. I'm not doing this. I'm trying to, love my neighbor. I'm trying to, be nice to people. All the things that we're like, that's easy, I feel like, to do. When it comes to obedience, we're like, yeah, God, okay, I got you. Yeah, I can do that. But what about the things that make us uncomfortable? What about when God asks us to do things that don't make sense? When He asks us to do things that, quite honestly, defies reason, it defies logic, it defies what culture is telling us we should do or how we should do things. And so I want to jump into that today. Because oftentimes when we talk about obedience, again, we talk about it in simple terms, but we don't talk about the cost that is associated with obedience and the cost that comes with obeying God sometimes when He asks us to do the hard things. Obedience is never free. And yes, I got my notes today because this was a lot. God downloaded a lot, and I was like, I can't miss this. So, sometimes I'm gonna have cards, sometimes I'm not. Today I have them. All right, and it's okay. So, but yeah, the cost of obedience isn't free, and it requires something of us. It requires us to do something that not only makes us uncomfortable, but sometimes causes us to confront things that we don't necessarily want to confront, or things that's going to make us, look like we are on the outside of what the norm is. It's going to cause us to be misunderstood sometimes. And we have to be okay with that if we are saying that we are going to follow after Christ with reckless abandonment, right? And so when we're thinking about obedience, one of the main things that came up for me as I was thinking about this is this whole idea of manifesting, and how manifesting really is the language of Antichrist. Because manifesting says, my will. I am going to allow my thoughts, my energy, my ideas to, bring to me the things that I want and to bring to me the things that I desire out of my life or in this life. Whereas obedience says what Jesus said, which is, Lord, not my will, but yours be done. And so when we're talking about obeying and obedience, it's really denying ourselves and denying our will and saying, okay, God, what is it that you want? What is it that you are requiring, of me? Obedience is when we say yes to God, even when, as I mentioned, logic, reason really kind of goes out the window. And we say, okay, God, what is it that you're wanting me to do in this moment? One of the things that, when God is asking us to obey him in certain areas, we have to realize that he's never asking us to do things that we can do in our own strength, right? So if it's something that we can do on our own, if it's something that we can accomplish without any supernatural intervention from God or without his direction, without his strategy, then we really don't need him. And so when he's asking us to do something, it requires us to do it in his strength, because ultimately he wants to get the glory out of our success. He wants to be glorified in our testimonies and the successes and the things that we're doing, in our life when we're walking in purpose and walking in destiny. He wants our lives to point back to him. And so oftentimes he asks us to do things that require us to rely completely on him. We can't rely on our own accreditation. We can't rely on our own qualifications or degrees or any of the things that would allow us to say, I did this on my own. I did this or I accomplished this by myself. When God asks us to do things, oftentimes it requires us to go to him and be like, how am I supposed to do this? And I was reminded of Gideon in the Bible in Judges. It talks about how God had called Gideon to rescue the Israelites out of the hand of the Midianites. And the Midianites was, this large, massive group, army who was oppressing Israel. And when God told Gideon that he was going to deliver the Israelites from the Midianites and he was going to use him to do it, Gideon was like, what? Come again? And he started to tell God all the reasons why he wouldn't do it or couldn't do it or shouldn't be called to do it. He's like, look, I'm the youngest in my father's house. My tribe or my clan is the poorest. Why would you choose me? Why would you use me to go up against this large, massive nation? And God's response to him was simply, have I not sent you? If I'm sending you, I'm going to go with you. My presence is going to be with you. And so that was all of the assurance that Gideon needed, right? Or you would think. And we see how Gideon begins to, go to God and be like, okay, give me a sign. If you really want me to do this, give me a sign. And okay, I need another one. And we do that too, right? When God has told us to do something and we're like, I don't know if this is really you. I need a sign. And so that's a natural reaction, I think, sometimes when we are unsure of God's voice, or if we're like, this seems so far outside of my capabilities. Like, why would you even ask me to do this? Why would you even ask me to start a business and I have no money? Why would you ask me to, go to this place or move to this area where I have no network, I have no connection, I have no family, I have no friends? You're asking me to give up this job and to go to a completely new place, based on what? Like, why would I do that? And so we start to ask God, okay, I need a sign. I need a something to reassure me that I'm hearing from you. And so that's not always a bad thing, but in the story of Gideon, God was just like, have I not sent you? Do what I'm asking you to do, and I'm going to be with you. And so it just highlights the fact that oftentimes we are so caught up on the qualifications and what is necessary, what we think is necessary to be obedient or to go and do what God is calling us to do. And God is just like, as long as I'm with you, you good. That's all the qualification you need. That's all of the preparation that you need. And as you go, then God begins to sort of lay out the steps and lay out, the further plans that He has for you. But it's all about trusting that if He told you to go, go. And so not going in our own strength is one of the things that we have to realize and remember, that we don't have to try to figure it all out. We don't have to have all of the answers in order to be obedient, even though we would like the answers, even though we would like to know, okay, how is this going to play out if I do this? God doesn't always show us that. And we just have to trust that if He's asking us to do it and He's telling us that I'm going to go with you, then that's all that we need, right? And so if you're in that place where you're like, okay, God, I know you want me to do this. I know you want me to go here, but I'm not qualified, for you to kind of question God with, well, I'm here and you're asking me to do this and I don't have this. It's almost like we're, telling God, like, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, when He's already told us, I'm Alpha and Omega, I'm the beginning and the end, right? So He knows our beginning, He knows our future, He knows the plans that He has for us. And even though He hasn't laid it out for us in that moment, He knows. And, it makes me think about my kids, when I tell them to do something and they're like, why? And sometimes I will explain it to them. Sometimes I will explain to them, I'm asking you to do this because of X, Y, or Z. But 9 times out of 10, when I tell them to do something, I'm not giving you the explanation. I just need you to do what I've asked you to do right now so that we can go on about our day. And we'll have a teaching moment maybe as we go along. But right now, I need you to just do what I'm telling you to do. And so we have to be mindful of how sometimes we allow ourselves to get stuck in really a place of disobedience because we're challenging God, or we're going back and forth with Him about what it is that He's asked us to do. And we're trying to tell Him that we're not qualified. And He's like, do it anyway, go anyway. Not only does obedience require you to sometimes go in God's strength and not your own strength, but it requires you to do things that make you uncomfortable, right? So, when we are in a place where we're content, we're happy, we know what to expect, things are moving kind of, as expected, we're going with the flow. And then God comes along and tells you, okay, I want you to do this over here. And you're like, why? Why? Like, I've got a routine. I've got things figured out in this space, in this season. And now you're wanting me to go and do something that is going to be uncomfortable. And we have to understand that God's reasoning or His rationale for asking us to do things that are uncomfortable, it's not like He's just, sitting up there playing a game of Simon Says, and He's like, okay, now I want you to do this, like how on Coming to America, He's like, okay, bark like a dog, and he was trying to see if she was going to do it in order to be the queen or whatever. That's not how God is. He's not operating like that. He's not, just sitting up there playing games with us. He asks us to do things that might make us uncomfortable, because he's trying to develop something in our character. He's trying to get us to trust him beyond what we understand, what we have experienced with him or in him so far. And sometimes he's trying to push us beyond our comfort level because he wants to show us really how strong and how tenacious and how resilient we are. God believes more and expects more from us sometimes, well, in most cases, than we do from ourselves, right? Because he knows what's in us. He knows the things that he's put in us, the things that he wants to develop in us. And so sometimes we don't even know what we're capable of until God pushes us to that place of discomfort. With going back to Gideon, one of the things that God asked him to do before he even went to battle with the Midianites is he told him to go and tear down the idols that his father had erected, had allowed to exist, which was in direct violation of God's law, right? Because they were not supposed to have any other gods before them. But here they've erected these idols, and God told Gideon to go and tear them down. That was one of the first acts of obedience that he required of him before going into battle with the Midianites. And so it required Gideon to do something that was uncomfortable because it required him to challenge culture. It required him to challenge and confront the status quo, if you will, of what was going on at that time. There was all this idol worship. Even his father was permitting it and allowing it to take place, and he had to go and tear it down, which ultimately, caused his life to be threatened, right? Because the people rose up against him, like, who told you to do that? Who told you, to go and tear down our idols? And so that was one of the first acts of obedience that God required of him. And it's typical of how God sometimes operates, where, before he makes us take these big jumps, he tests us with these little acts of obedience. Can you confront the things in your family that are, generational curses, or, as I talked about last week, cycles of silence and things like that? Can you confront those issues before I give you a bigger platform where you're trying to help everybody else, right? Can you deal with your family first? Can you deal with what's in your home first, before I send you out to deal with other people or put you on platforms or give you influence in other arenas? Can you deal with what's at home? Can you deal with what's in your city? And so we see that with Gideon, and it required him, again, to confront culture. Sometimes, confronting things that are in your family, traditions, ways of thinking, all of those things can be uncomfortable. And not just because it's your family, but it's where you come from. And so a lot of times you're going to get resistance because people are going to be looking at you like, well, who do you think you are? You come to your family and you're trying to, break cycles of poverty and things like that. And you come back trying to talk to them about generational wealth building and, financial literacy. And people are looking at you like, hey, who do you think you are? And it's uncomfortable. It's difficult to do that when, we're concerned or afraid about what people are thinking or what they're going to say or how they're going to react. But the truth of the matter is that when God tells us to do something, he never does it with the caveat, okay, I want you to do this, but I first want you to see what everybody else thinks about it. Like, I can't think of any instance where God is like, I want you to do this, but I want you to, take a survey of your family and friends or, close network of people and find out, what they think about it first. No, I'm giving you this instruction. I want you to do this. Go in my strength because I'm with you. Do it. And so God doesn't ask us to do things and then also ask us to get man's approval. In most cases, what God asks us to do is actually going to create resistance resistance from your family, resistance from those closest to you. I remember when I was moving to California, um, it was like the most random thing I've ever done in my life. I am a very type A person. So I have a plan for the plan, for the plan, for the backup plan, for the plan. And so when I had already been thinking about moving from Indiana, but I thought I was going to go to DC. That DC was on my radar. I was looking at jobs in DC. California was nowhere on my radar. But when I was presented with the idea of moving here and I started praying about it and I heard God and was like, okay, that's where I want you to go. It was met with resistance from my boss where I was working at because I had made a lot of strides at the attorney general's office where I was working. And so, they had plans for me. They had plans for me as an attorney in that office. And at the point that I gave my resignation letter, I'd only been there 6 months. And so they were like, what do you mean in 6 months you're leaving? Like you just got here. So I got resistance from them. They was like, well, what are you going to do in California? Who do you know there? What type of law are you going to be doing there? All of the questions that, those questions made sense. But it was like, God told me to move. This is what I'm doing, whether it makes sense to you or not. I got resistance from my family, and naturally, as a mom, I can't even imagine if one of my kids came to me and was like, I'm moving across the country. Well, first, I'm quitting my job. I don't have any money. I don't have a place to go. I don't have any family, but I'm moving across the country with my friend. And yeah, that's what we about to do. As a mother, I would be like, no, you're not. I don't care how old you are. You could be in your 20s. No, you're not. So I completely understand the resistance I got from my mom. It was funny because like literally there was a whole intervention. Like there was a meeting, there were questions that, I couldn't really answer all of them. Like and if you ever met my mom, when she asked questions, it'd be like bing, 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 bop, boom, bop, bang. Like rapid fire questions. Okay. And I didn't have the answer for all of them. My only answer was, this is what I'm doing. And I was confident in this is what God wanted me to do. And so even though I faced the resistance, it didn't shake what I knew God was instructing me to do. And so even in the face of that resistance, I still had to be obedient to God. And, bottom line is sometimes the vision that God gives to you, he doesn't give to everybody else. And so they're not able to see what you see, unless God told them the same thing he told you. They're not going to understand it. They're not going to see the vision. They're not going to see the plan. Right. And so that's where it's going to be incumbent upon you to trust that you got a relationship with God, trust that you know his voice, and trust that if he's told you to do something, it's going to cost you comfort. It's going to cost you challenging sometimes people who you look up to or admire if God is telling you to do something and they haven't grasped onto that plan yet. And that's okay because, they will see it later. Now, of course, my mom would be like, oh, yeah, it was such a good idea for you to move to California. But at the time, she was like, yeah, I don't think my mom believed I was moving until they came and picked up my car from Columbus. And she was like, oh, this is serious. Yes, you are actually leaving. I am out of here. I got my one-way ticket and I'm gone. Um, so, but that's what trusting God looks like, and being obedient to God. It's not just doing the things that are easy, doing the things that are comfortable, doing the things that get you the pat on the back from everybody else. And in a lot of cases, being obedient to God is going to get people looking at you sideways. It's going to get them looking at you like, okay, if you like it, I love it. That's my absolute, that is my favorite thing to say, because we all know what that means, right? By we, I mean, us Black people. We know when somebody is like, well, if you like it, I love it. That means I don't like it, but I'm let you live your life, do your thing, right? And so you might get that. But if you're being obedient, obedience is the safest place for you to be, not in a place where you're getting approval from man, who is not the author of your life, who is not going to be there when everything else fails, right? Only God is going to be that. And so it's necessary that we are in the place of obedience, which is where the safest place is, when we are in his will, right? And so not only does obedience sometimes cause us to, go up against the grain and go against the things that we think we should be doing, but it requires us to trust that if he has called us and he is instructing or directing us into a certain place, that he's going to give us the tools to do exactly what we need to do when we get there. And it may not always look like the tools that we think, right? And so, you know, when you're making moves or you're making decisions, a lot of times, people will hit you with well, do you have this? Do you have the business plan? Do you have this amount of money in the bank? And, do you have a network? And, do you have your email list of people that you're going to contact that's going to help you with this venture or help you with this? Or, do you have a platform? Do you have an influence? You want to write a book. Who knows you? Like, do you even have a voice where people would know who you are to go buy your book from the store? God is like, I didn't tell you to do all that. I didn't tell you to figure all that out. I told you to write the book. That's it. I told you to write the book. I told you to start the business. I told you to move to this area. I told you to start the church. Whatever it is that he has told you to do, he will give you the tools to do it. Going back to Gideon, when Gideon went to war, he went to war with a reduced army, right? So we started out with, I think, 32,000 men. God reduced it to 300. And they went to war with no weapons. So not only did he go with like this handful of men up against this major, massive army, but he went without any weapons. The only thing that they had in their hands were a pitcher and a trumpet. That's what they went to war with. And we see from that the victory that Gideon won was not because of his own strength or because of his own strategy, but it was because of God's divine intervention. And that's the same thing God wants to do in our lives when he is calling us out into the deep places. He's calling us out into the uncomfortable places. Is he wants to be able to brag on us, right? And he wants us to be able to ultimately give him glory when we do these different things in our lives and we have these successes, because we'll be able to say, you know what, this really was nobody but God. When I started my business, I had no leads. I had no network. Like I said, in California, I had at that point been working with firms. And so clients were the clients of the firm that I was working with. I didn't independently, have a group of people that I could call and be like, hey, all right, I've started my own firm now, so why don't y'all come over here and follow me? In fact, most places have, these non-compete provisions. So it's like, you don't even talk to my people. Don't communicate with none of my clients. Don't talk to any of them or I'm gonna sue you. But I knew that it was time for me to start my own business. I knew that that was something that was always in my heart to do. But at the time that I did it, it was like, again, I had nothing. I had no resources. I had no network of people. The only thing I knew was that, okay, God was like, now is the time to go ahead and launch out on your own. And God has been faithful every year since then. I started my business in 2013 and we're now in 2026. And there has not been a year, a month that I have not been able to do what I need to do as a business owner. And so, as entrepreneurs, we understand this faith walk very well, right? Because it's kind of like this idea, you eat what you kill, right? So as an entrepreneur, you got to go out, you got to be the hustler, you got to be the advertiser, you got to be the accountant. I had no knowledge of any of those roles. I had no understanding of what those roles look like in terms of running a business. I didn't have anyone in my family, immediate family, that I could go to and be like, how do you run a law firm? Everything I learned was on the fly with me and God, but it's brought me the biggest and greatest gains because at this point I'm like, ain't no way I could go work for somebody else. I can't do it. And it's not that I let me take that back. If I had to, I could, because I've done it. I've worked for other people. But it was like, okay, now is the time for you to move into entrepreneurship and running your own business. And now knowing what I know, looking back, I'm like, okay, this was perfect. This is exactly where you wanted me to be. And had I not been obedient, and had I not trusted that God was with me when he said, go and start your business, then I would very likely be in an office doing billable hours and hating it, absolutely hating it, and not living my best life because I couldn't trust God with the unknown. And so, he gave me the tools, he gave me the strategies, he gave me the ideas on, how to partner with other firms, how to partner with other people when it came to, trying to get clients and learn different areas of the law. God will give you the tools that you need to do what he's asked you to do. And in most cases, it's not going to look like the tools that you think that you need, right? And that's fine because he's not asking you to do it in your own strength. He's not asking you to go out there and do something by yourself and he's not going to be with you. If he sent you, he's going to go with you and he's going to be with you, and his presence with you is more than enough. It's more than what you need. It's going to be more than sufficient than you doing it on your own based on your own wherewithal and your own knowledge and your own skill. Sometimes people with the most education, right? The people with all the credentials behind their name, those are the hardest people to obey because, and I'm talking about myself, because we really have to divorce ourselves from reason. And this is what God is telling me to do. This over here makes absolutely no sense. Why would I do this? Everything that I've learned, everything that I've been taught tells me not to do this because I have no plan, because I have no foresight of what the next step is. But that's where God is like, I gave you that intellect. I gave you that knowledge and that ability to understand and to reason. But I'm asking you to do something, and either you're going to trust me and do it the way I'm telling you to do it, or you're going to be disobedient. I mean, either you obedient or you disobedient. It's one or the other, and there are consequences for being disobedient. I heard this pastor, he put it in such a profound way that it stuck with me. He said, seasons change, but time doesn't come back around, right? An appointed time happens once. Seasons can come back around. So, it's winter, it's going to be spring at some point, it's going to be summer, it's going to be fall. But an appointed time happens only once. It'll never be January 1st, 1969 again, right? And so what am I saying? You can absolutely miss your time because you're disobedient. Yes, Seasons may come back around. It might be, this is your season. This is your day. Whatever. It could be your season again. But you can absolutely miss your time if you are not obedient. And God's will is going to be established in the earth. His will is going to be established, right? His word, Bible says his word will not return unto him void. It will accomplish the purpose for which he sent it. So if God wills something in the earth and his desire is for you to do it, but you're disobedient, he'll find somebody else to do it. Absolutely will find somebody else to do it. And you will have missed your time because of disobedience. Disobedience can cause you to not only miss your time, but it can cause delayed purpose. God's purpose for you may be that you are financially set, that you are financially, well off and stable to where you don't have to be working 60, 70 hours. But because you won't trust him to start that business, you'll just continue in the rat race. You'll continue in this, state of like, here I am again at this job I hate, da, 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 because you're not being obedient. And he's like, if you would just trust me, I want to move you out of that place, but you're not being obedient. And so I guess you'll stay there till you decide to do what I told you to do, And so we have to be mindful of how disobedience can cause us to miss out on what it is that God has for us. Now, I've talked a lot about how obedience looks like God, telling us to go and telling us to do. But sometimes obedience looks like God telling us to stay. And I think for me, that's one of the areas where I really have had to be like, okay, God, I need you to, what are you saying again? Can you say it again? I didn't hear you. Because as an adult, I was able to realize how I had built up certain defense mechanisms based on things that I experienced as a child. So, I always say underprotected children become overprotective adults. And, I had formed this way of thinking like, as a child, I may have had to tolerate certain things, people treat me certain kind of way, but as an adult, I ain't got to deal with it. If I don't want to be here, I don't have to be here. That was one of, I know for sure, part of my desire to always be independent was like, you're never going to box me into a place that I don't want to be in. If I need to leave, I'm out. Like, I don't have to be nowhere I don't want to be or need to be, until God would put me in places and situations and I feel like I'm being mistreated. And he's like, you can't leave yet. Oh, I understand you want to leave this job right now, but it's not time. The place that I was working at immediately before I went out and started my own firm, oh my gosh. Like the days that I would drive to work and be like, I should just turn around. And God is like, no, you're not going to quit. You're going to go to work and you're going to serve as unto me. You're going to serve and do your work as unto me. And you're going to learn how to run a law firm while you're here. And so I had to learn that, I can't always run away or leave situations just because I don't like it. There are sometimes where God is making you stay in a situation because he's wanting to do something with your character. A lot of times it's the friction that brings to surface things that we either think we've overcome or things that we have buried and just decided we're not going to deal with, or certain triggers that we think we're over until we're in a situation where there's that friction, where there's that conflict, that rub. And so a lot of times God would have me stay in places where Tiffany in and of myself is like, I have every reason to leave. If I look at all the reasons why I should leave this situation, leave this place, I have legal grounds to do so. And yet God is like, nope, you got to stay. And to be quite honest, a lot of those situations happen in ministry, like in churches, where different leaders are just like, I don't have to tolerate you. I don't have to tolerate this. And God is like, yes, you do have to tolerate it because I didn't tell you to leave yet. I didn't tell you to go. And so we have to be obedient in those times where God is telling us to stay and not leave. Otherwise, we don't get the character development. We don't get the maturity that he's trying to pull out of us in that moment. Sometimes being obedient means staying and serving a person that you're more qualified than. Staying and serving a person that ultimately I'm going to replace you. You think about David and how God anointed David to be king, yet David ultimately had to go and serve Saul, knowing that he had already been anointed to be king, and God has moved his hand from Saul, but I have to go and serve him to help drive these evil spirits away from him. That is not uncommon. That's not an uncommon requirement where God puts us in situations where we have to serve people that we're more qualified than, or people that we will ultimately replace. He sometimes calls us to stay in places where people will deliberately mistreat you. In Luke, it talks about how God, how we're supposed to bless those who despitefully use us. You know that you are mistreating me. You know that you are using me. And God is telling me that I have to bless you. God is telling me that I have to serve you, even though you are intentionally misusing me, intentionally treating me wrong. I think about, like, in the law, when someone does something wrong to you, you sue them, you can ask for what are called punitive damages. Punitive damages come in where the person acted maliciously. And so not only are you entitled to your, baseline damages, right? Your out-of-pocket expenses, your medical costs, whatever. I'm entitled to 3 times that amount because you did something with the intention to cause me harm. The world says, you know what, Queen, you ain't got to deal with that. They not valuing you. They don't know your value. They don't know your worth. Chalking up the deuces, right? Or, hey, King, they not treating you right over here. Go get you another job. Go move to this situation. Move over here. That's what culture says. But God is telling us to bless those people, to serve as unto him. And so obedience, going back to this thing, that obedience is not comfortable. Obedience is not, sitting in a space or place where things are always going to look pretty or look nice. Paul talks about in Acts that he understood that being obedient was going to cause him to suffer. He knew that going to certain places, preaching the gospel, was going to cost him his life, that he was going to be beaten, that he was going to be persecuted, that he was going to suffer to be obedient. And he was like, okay, I'm okay with that. And we have to take that same stance that, you know what, God, whatever it is that you're calling me to do, whether it's move in this direction, go over here, or if it's stay in a situation for a season that I don't want to be in, I'm going to be obedient. I'm going to do what you have called me to do, because not my will, but yours be done. And it is there's a suffering that comes with obedience sometimes, but on the other side of that, what God is wanting and trying to get from us is, again, to establish his kingdom in the earth, right? You're not here just to be born, go to school, get a job, work for a time, retire, and then die. That is not why you were created. That's not why you were put here on the earth. You were put here for purpose. You were put here for destiny. You were put here to be a part of God's creative plan, and establishing His will in the earth. And so when He calls you to do certain things, when He calls us to move in certain areas, it's in the direction of fulfilling His will here on the earth. He's also calling us into obedience for intimacy with Him, to understand and know who He is more. Moving to California for me, it really was a journey of knowing God in a way that I've never known Him before. And I don't believe that I would have known Him in that way had I not been obedient. There was a period of time where I didn't know where money was coming from. I had planned for 6 months, the first 6 months when I moved to California. And my thought was, I'm employable. I have 2 degrees. I have a doctorate degree. It is not going to take me 6 months to get a job. So I'm going to move to California. I'm going to take the bar exam. And within 6 months, I'll have a job. And, things will be great. And it didn't happen like that at all. I passed the bar. Of course, the bar was easy for me. Just like the Indiana bar, and I'm not even trying to flex on that. It just was. School has always been easy for me, and so I've always been able to rely on the fact that I was smart. Like, I got good grades. My mom never had to help me with homework. I never struggled in school. It was just always easy for me. And so that for me was something that I could rely on. I could rely on my education. That was one of the tools that I had. I've got a degree. You can't take that from me. I'm employable. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to get a job. And after 6 months, after I'd taken the bar in February, I didn't have a job. I was actually being told no for jobs that I was overqualified for. And that was the wildest thing to me, because I'm like, did you look at my resume? Did you see my work history? I'm sorry. There's been a mistake, But it was during that process, God was like, I don't care about your degree. I gave you the knowledge. I gave you the know-how to grasp large amounts of information and apply it. I gave all that to you. That means nothing to me. I don't care about your little degree. I care about relationship with you. And so we about to go on this journey. And on a journey we went where I was like, I don't know where I'm going to eat, get money to eat from. But every day God made a way. I felt like one of the Israelites, because I could be walking down the streets in North Hollywood and I would see money on the ground. And that would be what I used to buy my food for the day. Or when I was working at Panera, people would give me tips, which they weren't supposed to give tips, that would help me pay a bill. The church that I had connected with, first church I had connected with when I came out here, they would have life group meetings on, I think, like Tuesdays and Wednesdays. And them people would cook. The life group I was in, they had an appetizer, an entree, and a dessert every Tuesday. And I was there every Tuesday. And so it was like, I knew on Tuesdays I didn't have to worry about nothing to eat. I knew that, the days I was working at Panera, I was going to be able to get me a free lunch or something. Everything, every need He supplied. And it taught me to trust and rely in who He was to me, and not my own tools, like not my education. And so that's what it's all about, right? God wants to show Himself to you. He wants you to understand and know Him as Father. He wants you to know Him as friend. He doesn't want you to know him based on what your mom told him. Your mom has her own journey with him. Your grandma has her own journey with God. God wants you to journey with him so that you know him, so that you can trust him, so that when he tells you to go, if God has told me to go, I'm going to go, and I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay because he's with me. And you only get to that place of trusting him when you have had a journey with him. You've had a history with him where like, okay, I know that I can trust. And not only do I know that I can hear your voice, but I can trust your voice. And so obedience is partnering with Christ so that his will is done in the earth, having that relationship with him, and then building the character that we need, right? Because again, obedience is not just about you getting to these fabulous places. Sometimes obedience is necessary for correction. It's necessary for building and working out those things in our character that need to be worked out, and that can only be worked out through obedience. I say this all the time. Having children is like the best teacher when it comes to understanding the word and understanding God and his ways and how he does things. When I tell my kids to do something, one of the things that I really try to impress upon them is obey the first time. When I tell you to do something, you obey the first time, not the second and third, and when you decide you're going to obey. Because at this point, now you're in trouble. I don't even care if you obey. You took too long to do it. Now you're in trouble. You need to obey the first time because there's a safety that comes with you doing what I tell you to do the first time. We could be walking down the street and I tell you to move to the left because I see a car coming. You have to just trust move yourself onto the left. I don't have time to go back and forth with you right now about why I'm telling you to move to the left. If you don't do what I tell you to do, you might get hit by this car. If I tell you not to touch the fire, I'm not about to explain to you why I don't want you to touch the fire. Don't touch it. Touch it, you might get burned. So there is a part of us, right, that just wants to do what we want to do. I talked about that at the beginning of this episode about, this whole idea of manifesting that is popular and trendy in culture of, bringing to myself what I feel is right for my life. Absolutely not. You have to be willing to submit your will to the will of Christ, to the will of God. And in doing that, it requires a certain level of obedience where if he tells you to go, you go. If he tells you to stop, stop. There is a protection. There is a grace there. There is a safety there. And so I hope that you walk away from this episode asking yourself, what are those areas in my life where I am not obeying? I am either going back and forth with God about, well, yeah, you told me to do this, but I ain't qualified. Or what about this? What about this? What about this? I need to play in. Show me a shoe. Can you say it again? I didn't hear you. Show me a sign. All of those things, right? All of the debating with God. What are you debating with him about? What has he told you to do that he clearly told you to do? But you're debating because you don't think you're qualified, or it's going to require you to be uncomfortable, right? Or what is he telling you? What area is he telling you to not move yet in? I don't want you to move yet. I want you to stay right there. And you're like, but you don't know what they did. He knows. He knows how they're treating you. He knows what they're saying about you. He knows how your boss does little things to be shady or whatever. He sees it all, right? But there's something that he's working in you in this situation that when he does eventually move you and tell you that you can go ahead and go to the next, you're going to be able to handle the people at the next job. It's not even going to phase you anymore, right? You're going to be prepared for the next situation that he puts you in because you have developed this certain character traits that he's trying to work in you by making you stay in this situation with these people, these nasty people that you got to just say, bless them, Lord, bless their family. And it's so funny because like, the Bible is say bless those who despitefully use you. But it don't say, like how you supposed to bless. The Bible ain't that specific. So, me, I still got a little petty. So I'll be like, when I'm praying for people that I just really don't like, and that really, I'm like, Lord, strike them down. I just be like, bless their day, Lord. And yes, thank you, Jesus. Amen. It's real quick. We in and out with that blessing, Lord. It's just bless them, Jesus. Amen. But it's a start. It's a start. It's a start. We got to start somewhere. And the more you do it, then you might be able to bless them a little bit more. And all of the things. God is still working on us. Bottom line is, it's sometimes situations that we don't want to be in where God is telling us to stay, and we just got to trust him and be obedient. So I hope that you evaluate and take note of those things in your life where you can trust God more, where you can be obedient more, where you can allow him to really direct your path. In spite of your plans, let him direct your path. So until next time.